Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining the Arkieva webinar, Watch the Signals, How to Create a Supply Chain Performance Monitoring System That Doesn't Keep You Up at Night. My name is Helena Tiablo. I'm the Marketing Manager here at Arkieva, and today I'm excited to have with me Shankar Gurumurthy, Arkieva Practice Director, who will be co-hosting this webinar. And Shankar is going to be showing us some exciting technology features that can help us create a better supply chain performance monitoring system.
Hello everyone, I'm quite excited to be here and I'm looking forward to share some of the technological advances that Arkieva has been making.
Great, thanks Shankar. Before we get started, I'd like to mention that if at any point in time you have trouble hearing us, please let us know by using the chat feature in GoToWebinar and we'll be sure to assist you. Also, we'll be opening up questions at the end of the webinar. Please feel free to submit your questions as you think of them, and we'll use the questions window in GoToWebinar to monitor that periodically. Also, at the end of the webinar, please fill out the survey to help us know how well we're doing. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so I want to start it off with something on the lighter side, and this is a quote by the famous cartoonist Bill Watterson. And it basically talks about the fact that there's not enough time to do all the nothings that we want to do. And since we're moving from the summer to the fall, I thought it'd just be a fun quote to start with, because it also relates to a basic human problem, which is the fact that there isn't enough time in the day to do all the things that we want to do. So what do we have to do about that as supply chain professionals? We have to prioritize so that we can make time for the nothings, and as well as for important but non-urgent tasks. And we're going to go into this a little bit more, but the goal with this is to help us so that we don't find ourselves firefighting all the time. So what are we going to talk about today? Let's go over the agenda. We're going to start off by talking about the foundation, setting the foundation by defining supply chain performance monitoring systems. And then we're also going to show the difference between traditional supply chain performance monitoring systems and more contemporary systems like the Arkieva platform. We're also going to talk about how to better prioritize using a simple decision matrix that was developed by Eisenhower. And then we're going to move into the fun part by talking about how to implement a more effective supply chain performance monitoring system. To do this, Shankar will discuss the role that alerts and notifications play in implementing a supply chain performance monitoring system. He'll also go over some examples of alerts and notifications to monitor. And then finally, we'll tie everything together by showing you how this is done with our Arkieva Pulse alerts and notifications feature that comes standard with our Arkieva platform. So to start off the discussion, let's first look at the definition of a supply chain performance monitoring system. A supply chain performance monitoring system can be defined as a set of processes and metrics used to quantify both the efficiency and effectiveness of the supply chain. A simple way to think about a supply chain performance monitoring system is to think of it like a car's dashboard, which provides vital information and warnings to the driver regarding speed, fuel level, engine temperature, oil, among others. Now, going back to that definition, the two key words to pay attention to is efficiency and effectiveness. An efficient supply chain performance monitoring system will minimize waste while increasing productivity. An effective supply chain performance monitoring system is focused on helping you achieve your ultimate supply chain goal, which is to create a better balance between demand and supply that can help you achieve your desired service levels. Simply put, you want to be able to deliver your manufacturer's products when your customer needs it and in the most cost-effective way possible. So for instance, on the demand side, you may want to be tracking how your forecast accuracy is doing. If it's decreasing or increasing, that's something that you want to pay attention to because it could affect your current production plan. You may also want to monitor how your inventory turnover is doing. So if you have items sitting in your warehouse that are not being sold, this could be as a result of some items that are becoming obsolete or some other reason that you need to find out. But ideally, you want to keep an eye on that. Then on the supply side, if you're not delivering your products in time in full, that's something that you want to keep an eye on as well, because that could ultimately affect your customer satisfaction. Essentially, you want your supply chain performance monitoring system to help you quickly monitor or measure the pulse of your supply chain processes, and hence the name Arkieva Pulse. Okay, so now that we've described what a supply chain performance monitoring system is, let's look at the difference between a traditional supply chain performance monitoring system and the more contemporary supply chain performance monitoring system. A traditional supply chain performance monitoring system usually focuses on crisis mitigation. It's very reactive in nature, and it's not very proactive. This is because they're updated at predetermined intervals, and the data is often intermittent in nature. And lastly, it depends on a monthly S&OP process, which reflects a snapshot taken at a particular period of time, usually before the S&OP process is frozen. On the other hand, contemporary S&OP, contemporary supply chain performance monitoring systems, similar to the Arkieva solution, allow for more proactive risk mitigation. This is because these systems are built to track early warning signs of irregularities in the supply chain. This is possible because the system is always on and continuously monitoring daily fluctuations in the supply chain process. And most importantly, it can also be customized based on business priorities. So essentially, you can quickly tell which items need immediate attention and which items can wait. To do this, you have to have a supply chain performance monitoring system that has that type of flexibility, and Shankar will be showing that in a little bit. All right, so now let's look at how you go about creating a prioritization system for your supply chain activities. And again, I want to start off the discussion by looking at this interesting quote from Stephen Covey, and he talks about the fact that most of us spend too much time on what's urgent and not enough time on what's important. What this basically means is that most of us spend time either firefighting or responding to items that look seemingly urgent. We'll explain more in a second. So how do you prioritize? And to help me explain this concept or this type of thinking, we'll use the Eisenhower decision matrix that you can see on the screen. This decision matrix was made popular by Stephen Covey through his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. A really good read. I definitely would recommend it if you haven't read it already. We have a blog that talks about this on our website, and it also talks about tips to stop firefighting, so that might be something that you want to check out as well. Now, when we take a closer look at the decision matrix boxes, each box represents a ranking that you would give to a particular task or activity. So, it's ranked based on importance and urgency. And to make this easier to identify, we've color-coded this. Red represents urgent and important tasks, so tasks that need to be dealt with right away. Going back to the car dashboard example, if your car breaks down as you're driving, that's an urgent and important task that needs to be dealt with right away. Now let's look at the yellow box on the top left corner. This represents tasks that are not urgent but are important. An everyday example of such an activity would be exercising. We all know exercising is important, but until we need it for, let's say, physical rehabilitation, or it's highly recommended by our doctor as a result of a health issue, we're likely not to see it as an urgent activity. Similarly, when we look at the green box at the bottom left corner of not urgent and important, These activities that we perform are leisure time and often have no sense of urgency or real importance. So for instance, watching hours of TV of your favorite show, that falls in the green box of not urgent and not important. Lastly, the gray box of urgent and not important. This is another item that can take up a bulk of our time. These items, while they may seem urgent, are not important. A typical example is checking your email every time you get a notification and then responding to that email as they come in. As a result of the notification, you may respond to the email as an item of urgency. But if it's not an email that needs a response right away, then it may not be important and can wait. As you think about prioritizing, you essentially want to focus more time on the yellow and red areas. Focusing on the red area of urgent and important tasks is relatively easy. It's given more time to the yellow area of not urgent but important. It's what gets a little tricky. But often, if we can focus on that, it can help us avoid having to react and firefight and be in a crisis mode all the time. So now that we've looked at this concept in a general sense, let's apply this to some supply chain activities. And to make this more interactive and fun, we've created a poll to help you think through how to prioritize your supply chain tasks. So for the purpose of this task, we're going to make the assumption that you don't focus on any items that are in the green box at work because, we're all very busy people. So for each activity, you have to indicate if you think the activity is a red item, that's an urgent and important task, a yellow item that's urgent, not urgent but important, or a gray item, urgent but not important. So I'm going to be launching the poll in a few minutes. Okay, and I will give everybody about 30 seconds to lock in your answers. Okay, so the poll will be closing in 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next item, and then I'm going to share the answers at the end. So the next item is if you have an unplanned maintenance shutdown. So again, go ahead and lock in your answers. All right, so I'm going to be closing the poll in a few minutes. Okay, so I'm closing it. And then we're going to go to the last one. So if you have a supply or demand imbalance. Okay, so I'm going to be closing it in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so very interesting answers that we have here. And rightfully so, because there is some sort of subjectivity to it. But so for the first poll that we did, strategic asset planning, a lot of people chose yellow, which is what we were thinking. So it's also okay for it to be red or gray. It really just depends on your business. So something like strategic asset planning is something that needs to be done, but it may not necessarily be urgent. It may not necessarily be urgent, but it's definitely important. So next, let's look at what everybody thought for second one. Okay, so for unplanned maintenance shutdown. So this is actually something that we struggled with a bit because we kind of battled back and forth. And but essentially, it really depends on why there's an unplanned maintenance shutdown. So if it's something that doesn't affect your production, then definitely it can be urgent, but not important. It could be urgent and important if it affects your production. So it really depends on the case. So I think the answers that we got are well in line. And then the last one is the supply-demand imbalance. I'm going to share that as well. Okay, so this one kind of had more mixed reviews, I think. So we have about 48% that think that's red, and some think that's yellow, and then a small percentage think it's gray. Well, depending on what's actually happening, it could be a red item. So, you know, if you get some sort of crisis where you have maybe an understock as a result of supply and demand imbalance, then that's definitely something that might be urgent and you need to respond to. But again, the thing to note is the answers would be specific to your business. So it's just, this exercise is to just help us kind of think through different tasks that we have to perform as supply chain professionals. So once we've looked at how to prioritize, now let's turn our attention to what you should monitor. I know most of you listed not knowing what to monitor as one of your current challenges when it comes to supply chain performance monitoring. It's really difficult to come up with a set of metrics that applies to all businesses. This is because every supply chain comes with its own set of nuances, and every business has a unique way of operating. But we are using this example because it's a simple enough example that it can apply to most businesses. So to help explain how you would go about creating metrics, we are going to talk about the 3 C's. And if you attended our last webinar, we talked about this as well. And most of the time, most of us think about consequences. So similar to the red items from our previous exercises. So in this example, our consequence is losing a customer, losing a key customer in this case. And we can all agree that that's a bad consequence that we'd like to avoid. In order for us to effectively avoid the consequence of losing a customer, we would have to work our way backwards, looking at our concerns, which is the point where the product is not available for the customer. And then, most importantly, looking at the causes so that we can put in place metrics for monitoring when there are irregularities, and then we can use that to track when things are about to go wrong. So you can see here that some of the causes could be as a result of lowered capacity, quality issues, or even raw material shortage. To create a more effective supply chain performance monitoring system, you'd monitor all the causes listed on the left-hand side of the bow tie diagram. And I think if you also attended our previous webinar, you'd be familiar with the bow tie diagram as well. And you essentially want to make sure that you have early warning indicators in place that can help you spot when things are going the wrong way. And then you want to avoid getting into the crisis management mode on the right-hand side. So in this example, some things on the left that you can kind of, actions that you could take to avoid having to get to the crisis mode, for instance, would be to prioritize your orders, to delay certain orders if it's not for key customers. So these are some of the things that you would have to put in place to replan. Essentially, as you're thinking about the metrics, you want to think about the causes, you want to think about plans that you want to put in place to be able to avoid having to get to the section where you're actually in crisis mode, because often crisis mode requires you having to pay a lot more money. So our goal is to avoid getting all the way to the end where we end up losing a key customer, but ideally we want to make sure that we can identify the causes and put in some barriers ahead of time. And again, we have a webinar that goes into more detail on this, so if this is something that you're interested in, you want to learn more about, that would be a good resource to check out. Okay, so now that we've looked at what you should monitor, let's now look at how you can be more proactive in your supply chain performance monitoring. And really the simple answer is to implement an effective supply chain monitoring system. And what makes an effective supply chain monitoring system is people, and we're going to make the assumption that you already have the right people in place. Process, and as I mentioned, our last webinar, we talked a little bit more about how to create a process for monitoring your supply chain more effectively. And then today's webinar is going to focus a little bit more on the technology part of things. So how do you go about using the technology that's available to be able to create a better supply chain performance monitoring system? And now I'm going to turn it over to Shankar.
Thank you, Helen. Before we actually begin talking about the Arkieva alerts and notification module, I would like to give an overview of who Arkieva is. Arkieva provides supply chain software solution across a wide spectrum, including portfolio segmentation, demand forecasting, inventory management and optimization, supply capacity planning, finite scheduling, and also we provide overall supply chain visibility and tracking of metrics as part of our S&OP offering in the form of dashboards and reports. Since the time we've been in business, our one and only focus has been supply chain planning alone. And in fact, we are coming up shortly on our 25th anniversary next year. Arkieva is a tightly integrated framework, and we are heavily married to Microsoft. So the look and feel of the application would feel very much like, excuse me, Microsoft Office or Microsoft PowerPoint. Arkieva is a highly configurable and scalable solution, both in terms of functionality as well as users. Organizations typically tend to pilot the solution for a small subset of the business, and they can quite easily scale it to a much larger audience within their organization. Now this brings us to the focus for our webinar today, alerts and notification. The Arkieva alerts and notification module falls under the S&OP umbrella. So on the screen you can see the various components of the Arkieva S&OP solution. And the center of the screen is the Arkieva calendar. The Arkieva calendar acts as a liaison between the various components that are available in the S&OP platform. The Arkieva calendar allows you to model different supply chain events So things like your monthly S&OP meetings, your demand review, or if you have a weekly S&OP, weekly supply review meeting, all these are modeled using the Arkieva calendar. In fact, you can also model things like if you have promotional campaigns coming up, or pretty much any time-sensitive activity, supply chain activity, it can be modeled using the Arkieva calendar. The S&OP platform also allows for native integration between the Arkieva modules such as demand, inventory, finance, and S&OP. And it also enables integration with external applications such as your CRM systems. Users can very easily create nice-looking dashboards using the S&OP platform. And they can also email these dashboards and reports using the workflow manager to a variety of audience within their business. In the subsequent slides, I'm actually going to get into an in-depth, we're going to go into an in-depth look at the alerts and notification module. And we're going to show you how it's implemented to help planners with their day-to-day activities. Okay, so to start talking about how we actually implement a good performance monitoring system, we first have to define what an alert is. An alert tells you some violation has happened in your established supply chain network. And not all alerts need to necessarily trigger a notification. So what do I mean by that? Let's say, for example, you have one of those fancy home alarm systems that can alert you on your mobile device each time the back door of your house is opened. Sure, it's absolutely vital to detect intruders, but let's say your kids are playing in your backyard and you get an alert each time your kids open that back door. It soon start going to get annoying to you, and you will pretty much shut the whole system down. So that's what we mean by defining some boundary conditions for your alerts on when it should actually trigger a notification. When it comes to implementation of alerts, there are two key types of alerts in the Arkieva system: an event-based alert and an incident-based alert. And we will look into examples for each one of these types of alerts in the next subsequent slides. You can also set categories for your alerts. You could have a global category of alerts that is applicable for a wide range of audience within your business. You could also configure personal alerts just for yourself, or you could configure system-level alerts that are applicable for standard routine processes from within the application. There are three key modes in which the alerts will notify you as a user. You could get a desktop pop-up notification, or you could get an email notification, or if you've configured for the Arkieva mobile service, you will get an SMS text message with the alert information. Talking about the features of Arkieva, the Arkieva alert is a service. What that means is the service is constantly monitoring the system for any anomalies. You can also schedule an alert to say you want to evaluate certain alert condition on a set frequency, and that can also be done. There is also the flexibility for you to configure a notification hierarchy. And one of the really cool features about the Arkieva application is it comes standard with a bunch of templates. So users can make copies of the standard templates and model it according to their business needs. Alerts can be distributed by user groups. So you may have a account manager community, you may have a financial planning community, and you may have supply planner community. Alerts can be distributed to different groups of audience, or you could create alerts just for yourself. Or if other users have access to the alerts module, they can subscribe to existing alerts within the application. Now finally, all of these comes together in the form of severity. So alerts are categorized as high, medium, and low. So say, for example, if there is a crisis situation and the Arkieva system highlights a high-level alert, maybe it's not just the planner who needs to be notified, the planner, the plant manager, and maybe even the BU director, all three of them might need to be notified when there is a high severity alert. And this is made possible using the notification hierarchy that I described earlier. Now this brings us to the two types of alerts. The first type that I described earlier is the event type of an alert. So what is an event? An event is either a scheduled or a recurring activity that's tied to your supply chain workflow. And it is typically modeled using the Arkieva calendar. Now when I say supply chain workflow, there are several different work streams that fall under the supply chain workflow. So things like your monthly demand planning, you have a supply planning or inventory management, or even your financial planning. All these are different work streams. And in the next subsequent slides, I'm going to show you examples for each one of those different work streams. So let's start with the examples of event alerts that fall under the demand planning category. Using the Arkieva demand planning calendar, a statistical forecast gets generated each cycle. And you may have a situation where October's forecast that was generated this month might be 5% greater than what was generated the previous cycle. And you may want to be alerted for this particular situation because you may not have sufficient capacity to meet that increased demand. You can also monitor the forecast errors for your top accounts, or you can also just simply send a notification to say the forecast cycle is going to be ending in the next couple of days. On the inventory planning side, you may have a need to track the products that have a really low days of inventory, or if you have a situation where you're often dipping into your safety stock, or if you have excess inventory, you may want to be notified of such situations. On the supply planning side, one common example that we've often seen is running out of capacity. And there might be situations where you need to be notified whenever you see a very high utilization. So in this example, the first example that I have, if the capacity utilization is at 100% for the next subsequent months, you may want to be notified so that you can do some balancing on the supply side. You can also get a notification if the current plan is infeasible and you're not able to meet all the demand. But you can also add more contextual information, like in this example, where you can compare two different scenarios, one with an upside demand and an official plan, and the upside demand is giving you an additional 4.5% in terms of margin. So some contextual information can be included alongside your alerts. Now, talking about finance, there is often a need to track year-to-date sales against your budget. Or if your organization has year-end goals for what your inventory needs to be, Arkieva is able to project your current inventory, and if it seems like you might be, if there is a big gap, you can be alerted around it. Now, pretty much, if you want any type of data-related items, so if you have logistical costs that you want to track year-to-date versus compared to last year, that can also be made possible using the alerts and notification module. The other type of alert that I described earlier is an incident type of an alert. An incident essentially refers to an unexpected action committed either by a user or the system. These are essentially not any scheduled activity, but some violation was made by a particular user, and you want to be notified immediately about this problem. So let's look at a few examples of user-triggered alerts. Let's say you're responsible for some key accounts in your business, and someone else has made a forecast adjustment exceeding 10% of the previous value. And you may want to be immediately notified for this unexpected adjustment made by someone else for the accounts that you're responsible for. You may also have a situation where you have some key reports that you've created and that gets distributed to a wide variety of audience. And if someone else modified this particular report, you may want to be notified about this change. What are some examples on the system-triggered alerts of typically planning applications like Arkieva? There is often the need to publish the forecast from Arkieva into your ERP system. And let's say as a key user, you publish the forecast, you want to be notified that the action completed successfully. On the flip side, let's say the files fail to arrive from ERP into the Arkieva application, either your sales history or your master data. You want to be notified that the data is missing so that you can take some actions around it. So in summary, the Arkieva Pulse Alerts and Notification module is a platform-level feature that can be configured by interrelating data and information between different modules. And it also comes with a predefined set of templates that you can make use of. It also allows you to easily flag and review irregularities in your supply chain. And it not only notifies you that something has happened, but it will include contextual information to help you find a quick resolution. Okay. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to do a demonstration of the Arkieva Pulse Alerts and Notification. Since the alerts are highly sensitive to dates and data, and also considering how much time we have for this webinar, I've gone ahead and recorded a video of the tool, which we will play right now.
The Pulse Alerts and Notifications is a powerful inbuilt Arkieva feature designed to streamline supply chain performance monitoring, making it easier to discover ahead of time irregularities in your supply chain. As I mentioned earlier, it comes standard with event and incident-based alerts. An event alert signals when a scheduled or a recurring activity is scheduled to occur, and an incident alert signals when a process threshold is breached either by a user or the system. You can configure both types of alerts to send emails, pop-up notifications, text messages, either to yourselves or to other decision makers from within your business. As a demand planner, you have a promotional event that's coming up and you would like to keep an eye on it, meaning that you want to easily track the demand increases while the promotion is ongoing. You can easily configure an alert to track the demand by double-clicking on the event created using the Arkieva calendar and launching the Configure Alert window here. From the Configure Alert window, we can see the Subscriber tab. This is where we can check who will receive an alert, or we can check here to just send alerts to ourselves. Also notice that we can attach a dashboard with this particular alert. And if we look towards the bottom of the window, we can see the checkboxes to receive and send email and pop-up notifications. If a person has enabled Arkieva mobile alerts, they will also receive an SMS text message for this alert. When the alert actually fires, we will get a desktop pop-up notification and an email with the corresponding dashboard attached. As someone in charge of financial planning, you may be interested in tracking changes greater than a certain amount during the budgeting season. Since the Pulse feature connects to your Arkieva workbenches, you can quickly create an alert to receive a notification whenever an adjustment is made. For instance, an override of greater than 4 million on the budget line. Once this alert is set up, when someone makes an override greater than 4 million, you will receive a notification and an email letting you know of the same. As with most forecasting processes, there is often the need to align statistical forecast with forecasts provided by the people on the ground. This includes your sales and marketing team who might be privy to information that's not readily available from the statistical forecast. Such information as a special order by a customer that's not already in the system. A custom action is a user-accessible button that can be configured to complete certain manual functions. These custom actions can also be configured to fire off an alert. One example would be publishing the forecast to ERP. When the user presses the button, not only will it complete its task, but it will also send a notification to everyone subscribed to that alert. This could be configured to send a notification saying forecast was successfully published to ERP. Another example would be if the flat files fail to arrive from ERP for the nightly batch routine, and a notification can be configured saying that the folder was empty. And another example is when different what-if scenarios are solved on the supply side, and an alert will fire when the scenario becomes infeasible. After a period of time, you may have the need to delete or modify an existing alert. Once alerts are created, you have the option of stopping them or making modification if needed from the Arkieva Pulse Manage Alerts window.
Okay, thanks so much, Shankar, for that presentation. I feel that was very insightful. So please visit our website to see a demo if you like to see how this solution works within your current Arkieva platform, or if you're just interested in seeing the Arkieva platform as a whole. You can do that by just clicking the red button on the top right corner on the website, or you can also email me to let me know. So again, as mentioned, our previous webinar on 4 steps to building a plan and defense system goes into more detail on how you can identify early warning signs. So that you may want to check that out as well, because it really went into the bulk of the process part of this presentation. And again, we have other recorded webinars on our website that you may find interesting. As a thank you for joining today's webinar, we're also going to be providing this white paper titled The Ultimate Guide to Better Supply Chain Performance Management. And this goes into a little bit more detail, again, on how to really track signals ahead of time so that you don't have to be in crisis mode all the time. So to wrap up, aim to be proactive instead of reactive. And this is very critical, paying attention to those yellow items that are important but not urgent at the moment. And create alerts that have different severity levels. So basically this helps you better prioritize so that you're not always firefighting all the time. So you don't want every alert to say it's important and it's high alert and you need to kind of deal with it right away. You want to have the different severity levels that Shankar showed. And always, as always, having a solution or a tool that has the embedded features already makes life a lot easier than having to do everything by yourself. And again, we'll have this recording available on our website, and we'll also be sending it to everyone that's attended the webinar. So now we're going to move on to the questions portion of the presentation. So if you have any questions, feel free to enter that in the questions section in GoToWebinar.
So we have a question from Mr. Natarajan on how about monetary consequences such as penalties. So when I would speak from an Arkieva application standpoint, the Arkieva application is data agnostic. So let's say if the model says that I'm able to meet this excess demand, but really you want to see the impact from a monetary standpoint, it's very easy to do that from within the Arkieva application. So yes, it's not just about meeting additional volume, but you want to see the impact on in terms of monetary terms. And the other question that we have is from Olivier Kinderman. Is Arkieva able to identify the causes, or does this information have to be provided by the users? Typically during any implementation, we would sit down with the users to define all the criteria for the model or all the constraints that go into a model. So within the application, there is an area to model all these business rules. So when there is a situation such as we have an unmet demand of 10,000 pounds, the users can very easily identify what are the causes for such unmet demand. So it's modeled from within the arkieva application.
Okay, great. We also have a question from Tom. So Tom wants to know that you showed different severity levels of high, medium, low. Do you have the flexibility with this, or are these only the standard?
Sure, that's an excellent question. The high, medium, low severity levels, I use it for illustration purposes, but behind the scene, there are data thresholds that control what is the definition of high. So let's say in terms of forecast accuracy errors, if the error is greater than 120%, that's what qualifies as a high error, and a medium severity error could be something that's between 70% and 99%. And you could set up anything less than 70% is a low severity error. And you can also add more categories from within the application, and it's highly configurable.
Okay, great. Peter also has a question about alerts. So he says, are alerts always intended to identify if something is unfavorable, or if something unfavorable has happened in the network? Can an alert relate to a more positive activity?
That's a good one. So in one of the examples where I shared about a system-triggered alert, alerts are not always there to identify that something bad has happened. So if you're trying to, say, publish the forecast information from arkieva to your ERP system, and if the action completed successfully, yes, you want to be notified for that successful action. So alerts can be used for successful actions within the application.
And we have some hands that are raised, so we're going to be taking the questions using the questions chat feature. So if you have questions, feel free to use that section. It usually helps if we don't open up the phone lines. Okay, so I think this is all that we have time for today. Thank you everybody for joining us. If you have some questions that were not answered, we're going to be sure to follow up with you offline after this webinar. Thank you once again and have a good day.
Thank you everyone.